Olivia Foster stared at the receipt in her hand, her vision blurring as tears threatened to spill. $27.34 for children's cough medicine. The third medical expense this month. "I can't cover this one, Liv," said Daniel, not looking up from his laptop at the kitchen island. "We agreed. 50-50 on all household expenses." Olivia's hand trembled. "This isn't a household expense, Daniel. This is our son's medication. Medical costs fall under family expenses according to our agreement," he replied, fingers still typing away at whatever proposal was more important than his wife's distress. "I put my half in the joint account this morning." She placed the receipt deliberately on the counter beside him. "I make less than half of what you do. I can't keep—" "We've been over this," Daniel interrupted, finally meeting her gaze with those cool gray eyes. "Equal partnership means equal contribution. It's only fair." The words fair hung in the air between them, as ironic and heavy as the silence that followed. "I understand," Olivia said quietly, picking up her purse. "I'll figure it out." Daniel returned to his laptop without another word as Olivia walked to the door. He didn't notice her lingering glance at the framed photo on the entryway table, their wedding day, 5 years and a lifetime ago. He didn't see her slip a small USB drive from her pocket and place it inside her wallet, and he certainly didn't know what would happen tomorrow. 3 years earlier, Olivia had been the rising star at Mitchell & Hargrove Advertising. Creative, driven, and passionate about her work, she had just secured the agency's biggest account when she met Daniel Foster at a business mixer. Daniel was everything she thought she wanted. Successful, ambitious with a sharp mind and sharper wit. As CFO of Meridian Tech Solutions, he moved through the world with the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. Their courtship was a whirlwind of expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, and late-night conversations about their dreams. Daniel talked about financial independence, early retirement, investment portfolios. Olivia spoke of creativity, family, and making a difference. Somehow, in the intoxicating early days of their relationship, these different visions seemed complementary rather than contradictory. The wedding was lavish. Daniel's parents insisted, and they bought a house in the suburbs that stretched Olivia's budget, but barely dented Daniel's. It wasn't until they returned from their honeymoon that Daniel first suggested they keep their finances separate. "It just makes more sense," he explained. Over dinner in their new dining room, still half filled with moving boxes, we're both adults with established careers. "This way, we maintain our independence," Olivia had agreed, though something in her stomach tightened at his choice of words. Independence within a marriage. It seemed reasonable enough on the surface. They established a joint account for household expenses, with each contributing equally. The system worked well enough at first. Olivia scaled back on personal expenses to match her contributions, while Daniel continued his business trips, golf club membership, and weekly dinners with clients. She noticed but said nothing. Then came the pregnancy, unplanned but not unwelcome, at least not for Olivia. Daniel had stared at the positive test with an expression that flickered between shock, calculation, and resignation. "This changes things," was all he said. And change they did. Olivia's pregnancy was difficult. Hyperemesis gravidarum landed her in the hospital twice. Her doctor recommended reduced hours at work. The agency was supportive but clear. A reduced schedule meant reduced pay. "Maybe we should rethink our financial arrangement," Olivia suggested one evening, calculating bills at the kitchen table while Daniel scrolled through his phone. "Just temporarily, while my income is affected." Daniel lowered his phone, his expression puzzled. "Why would we do that? Your pregnancy was your choice to continue." "Our choice," Olivia corrected, the words sticking in her throat. "Of course," he amended smoothly, "but the point stands. 50-50 keeps things simple and fair." 8 months later, Thomas Foster was born, healthy, beautiful, and colicky. Olivia's maternity leave stretched her finances to the breaking point. Daniel contributed his half of the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and now baby supplies. But the medical bills from the difficult pregnancy fell into a gray area he categorized as personal expenses. When Olivia returned to work, it was part-time and remote, a compromise that allowed her to care for Thomas while maintaining some income. Daniel's career, meanwhile, accelerated. A promotion, a substantial raise, and longer hours took him away from home more frequently, leaving Olivia juggling work and an infant largely alone. 2 years passed in a blur of exhaustion, resentment, and quiet desperation. Olivia's savings dwindled, then disappeared. Her credit cards approached their limits. Each month became a careful ballet of which bill to pay and which to delay. Through it all, Daniel maintained his position: equal partnership, equal contribution. The final straw came when Thomas, now a rambunctious toddler, developed chronic ear infections. The specialist wasn't covered by insurance. The medications were expensive. The lost work hours when Olivia had to care for their sick child meant less income to cover her share of expenses. One evening, while searching Daniel's desk for a receipt he'd asked her to file, Olivia found a statement for a separate bank account she didn't know existed. The balance made her sink into his office chair, hand over her mouth. Over $300,000. Money that had been accumulating while she scrimped and borrowed to cover her equal share. That night, after putting Thomas to bed, Olivia sat in the dim light of their home office, her laptop open to their banking portal. With Daniel working late again, she had the quiet she needed to examine their financial history in detail. What she discovered changed everything. Olivia arrived at Meridian Tech Solutions, glass and steel headquarters at precisely 9:15 a.m. Thomas balanced on her hip. The security guard recognized her and waved her through with a smile. She'd attended enough company functions to be a familiar face. "Mrs. Foster and little Thomas," called Daniel's assistant, Veronica, rising from her desk. "Daniel didn't mention you were stopping by." "It's a surprise," Olivia replied, managing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Is he in a meeting?" "Budget review with the executive team. Should be wrapping up in about 15 minutes. Veronica glanced at the conference room down the hall. "Can I get you anything while you wait?" "No, thank you. We'll just sit in his office if that's okay." "Of course." Veronica hesitated. "Is everything all right?" "You seem—" "Everything's fine," Olivia assured her, already moving toward Daniel's corner office. "Just a family matter." Inside the sleek, minimalist space, Olivia set Thomas down with his favorite toy car and closed the door. She moved to Daniel's computer and inserted the USB drive she'd prepared the night before. The documents were already organized, labeled, and ready for presentation. 3 years of financial records, annotated and analyzed. Bank statements, investment accounts, detailed breakdowns of their respective contributions to household, expenses relative to income. The evidence was damning. While Olivia had contributed exactly 50% to their joint expenses, often at great personal cost, Daniel had been quietly building his own wealth. The mortgage payments she struggled to match each month amounted to less than 8% of his monthly income. For Olivia, they consumed nearly 40% of hers. More disturbing were the discrepancies in how expenses were categorized. Landscaping for the yard, Daniel insisted on upgrading, was a household expense they split equally. Yet when Olivia needed dental work, that was her personal expense. Most revealing was the spreadsheet Daniel had created, a cost-benefit analysis of their marriage that made Olivia's stomach turn. Every aspect of their life together assigned a monetary value. Even Thomas had a column, with calculations for tax benefits weighed against increased expenses. Olivia heard voices in the hallway. She quickly closed the incriminating files but left the USB in the computer. Lifting Thomas, she settled into one of the visitor chairs just as the door opened. Daniel froze momentarily in the doorway, his expression flickering from surprise to annoyance before settling into a practiced smile. "Olivia, Thomas, this is unexpected." "Daddy!" Thomas squirmed to get down, and Olivia released him to toddle toward his father. Daniel scooped him up reflexively, but kept his questioning gaze on Olivia. "I have another meeting in 20 minutes. "This won't take long," Olivia said, her voice surprisingly steady. I just thought your colleagues might be interested in seeing your detailed financial analysis of our marriage. Daniel's face drained of color. His eyes darted to his computer, where the USB drive was barely visible. What are you talking about? I found everything, Daniel. The separate accounts. The way you've categorized our expenses to benefit you. That charming spreadsheet where you calculated the ROI on our relationship. Olivia stood smoothing her dress. I particularly enjoyed the column where you projected how much you'd save if I took on even more childcare responsibilities so you could work longer hours. Daniel's jaw tightened. He set Thomas down, nudging him toward the toy he'd abandoned. This isn't the place. Actually, it's exactly the place, Olivia interrupted. Your precious professional reputation is about to take a hit. Right after I show the board exactly how their CFO handles his personal finances. You wouldn't dare, wouldn't I? After discovering you've essentially been financially abusing me for years while I struggled to care for our son? Olivia stepped closer, lowering her voice. Did you really think I was that stupid? That I wouldn't eventually figure out what you were doing? For a moment, something like shame crossed Daniel's features, quickly replaced by calculation. What do you want? He asked, his voice cold. I want a divorce. I want full custody of Thomas. I want the house and half of everything you've accumulated during our marriage, including that secret account you thought I didn't know about. Daniel laughed, though the sound held no humor. You'll never get full custody. And as for the money, we have a prenup, remember? What's mine stays mine. Olivia smiled then, a small, knowing curve of her lips that made Daniel's confidence falter. Check clause 12.3 of that prenup, Daniel. The one about material non-disclosure of assets. Your father's lawyer was more thorough than you realized. She glanced at her watch. I've made copies of everything. You have until 5 p.m. to call your lawyer and agree to my terms. Or tomorrow, the board sees everything. Daniel's face contorted with rage. You manipulative? Careful, Olivia warned, glancing meaningfully at Thomas, who was watching them with wide eyes. Remember where you are. She moved to retrieve her son, but Daniel stepped forward, grabbing her arm. You can't just walk in here and threaten me, he hissed. I made you. Without me, you'd still be making coffee runs at that second-rate agency. The door to the office opened and Veronica appeared, her expression concerned. Is everything okay? I heard voices raised. Daniel released Olivia's arm immediately, his public mask sliding back into place. Everything's fine, Veronica. My wife was just leaving. Actually, Olivia said, reaching for the USB drive and removing it from the computer. I think you're the one who's leaving. Coming, Thomas? She picked up their son and walked past Daniel, pausing in the doorway to deliver one final blow. By the way, I've accepted the creative director position at Levinson Global. The one you said I wasn't qualified for? She smiled sweetly. They're doubling my current salary. Turns out I'm worth quite a bit more than you calculated. Daniel slammed the door to their house so hard the picture frames rattled on the walls. Olivia had anticipated his rage, had arranged for her mother to take Thomas for the evening specifically to avoid exposing him to the confrontation she knew was coming. Have you lost your mind? Daniel shouted, stalking into the kitchen where Olivia calmly prepared tea. You humiliated me in my own office, threatened my career, my reputation. Interesting that you're more concerned about your reputation than the fact that you've been financially exploiting your wife for years, Olivia observed, not looking up from the steaming mug in front of her. Very telling. Exploiting you? By expecting an adult woman to pay her fair share? Daniel's laugh was harsh, incredulous. That's rich, Olivia. Really rich? Olivia finally raised her eyes to meet his. There's nothing fair about demanding equal contribution from unequal incomes. Nothing fair about categorizing our son's medical expenses as my responsibility while your golf membership was somehow a networking necessity. I earned my position. I earned my salary. Daniel's face flushed with indignation. No one handed me anything, and I didn't earn mine? I didn't work 60-hour weeks before Thomas was born. I haven't been juggling a career and a child while you're out having business dinners. Olivia's composure began to crack, years of suppressed hurt and anger finally finding voice. The difference is that I was expected to sacrifice my career to raise our son while still somehow matching your financial contributions. Daniel paced the kitchen, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. This is absurd. We had an agreement. An agreement you designed to benefit yourself at my expense. Olivia pushed a folder across the counter toward him. I've documented everything, Daniel. Every inequity. Every instance where you manipulated our financial arrangement to maintain your lifestyle while I could barely make ends meet. He ignored the folder. So what now? You think you can blackmail me with this? Ruin everything we've built? We haven't built anything together, Olivia replied, her voice softening with a sadness that momentarily cut through her anger. That's the point. You built your life, and I was just an accessory. A wife who could look good at company functions and raise your child while contributing to your mortgage. Something in her tone made Daniel pause. For a moment, the mask of indignation slipped, and Olivia caught a glimpse of the man she'd fallen in love with. Thoughtful, perceptive, capable of empathy. It wasn't. It wasn't supposed to be like that, he said, his voice quieter now. But it was, and you know it. Olivia pushed away from the counter. Tell me something, Daniel. When did you start seeing me as a financial liability instead of your partner? Daniel's shoulders sagged as he leaned against the opposite counter. It wasn't one moment. It was incremental. Try, when did it start? He was silent for a long moment, eyes fixed on some middle distance. When you decided to keep the pregnancy, the words hung in the air, brutal in their honesty. I see. Olivia absorbed the blow, finding she'd already known the answer on some level. And that justified creating a system that would slowly drain me financially while you accumulated wealth? I didn't think of it that way, Daniel admitted. I just saw it as protecting myself. From what? From me? From your own son? Olivia shook her head in disbelief. We were supposed to be a team, Daniel. That's what marriage means. My parents... I don't care about your parents' dysfunctional marriage. Olivia's control finally shattered. Your mother used your father for his money. I get it. You've told me 1,000 times. But I never asked you for anything except partnership. Real partnership. Daniel picked up the folder and began flipping through the pages, his expression growing more troubled with each document. Olivia had been thorough. Spreadsheets comparing their relative financial burdens, annotated bank statements, even a graph showing the divergence in their personal savings over the course of their marriage. You've been planning this for a while, he said finally, closing the folder. No, I discovered most of this yesterday. But I'm good at my job, Daniel. I know how to compile data and tell a compelling story. Olivia crossed her arms. The story here is that you systematically ensured your financial growth at the expense of mine, all while I was caring for our child. Daniel set the folder down, his expression unreadable. What do you really want, Olivia? I told you at the office. Divorce, custody, financial settlement. She met his gaze steadily. But what I really want, what I've always wanted, is for you to see me as an equal. Not an expense to be managed. Something shifted in Daniel's eyes. A realization, perhaps. Or simply the recognition that he'd been outmaneuvered. You know I'll fight you on custody, he said, though his tone lacked conviction. Will you? How many diapers have you changed, Daniel? How many pediatrician appointments have you attended? Can you name Thomas's favorite book? Olivia shook her head sadly. You don't want custody. You want to use Thomas as a bargaining chip. Daniel's silence was confirmation enough. I've already spoken to a lawyer, Olivia continued. She's drawing up the papers. Given the evidence I've compiled, she believes a judge would likely rule in my favor on all counts, especially if this became a public matter. You'd do that? Expose our private life in court? I don't want to, Olivia admitted. Despite everything, I once loved you. I don't want to humiliate you, but I will if I have to, for Thomas's sake. Daniel moved to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn he'd insisted on upgrading last spring. An expense they'd split equally despite it being his idea. One day, he said quietly, you'll realize I was right about money? About keeping things separate. Olivia felt a wave of pity for him then. This man who had reduced their marriage to a balance sheet. No, Daniel. One day, maybe you'll realize what you sacrificed for your bank account. She picked up her purse from the counter. I'll be staying at my mother's with Thomas until you've moved out. You have 3 days. Daniel turned, surprise evident on his face. You're giving me the choice to leave? Yes, Olivia replied. Because unlike you, I recognize that choices have value beyond their financial impact. As she walked toward the door, Daniel called after her. The prenup won't hold up, Olivia finished for him. Not with the evidence I have of financial manipulation and hidden assets. But if you agree to my terms without a fight, I won't take this to your board of directors. She paused at the threshold, turning back one last time. The irony, Daniel, is that if you had treated our marriage as a true partnership, if you had adjusted our financial responsibilities to reflect our income disparity, I probably would have stayed. Despite everything? I never meant to hurt you, he said. And for the first time that day, Olivia believed him. I know, she replied softly. That almost makes it worse. 1 year later, Olivia adjusted the painting in the entryway of her new home. A modest 3-bedroom ranch that felt more like a home than the showpiece she'd shared with Daniel ever had. Through the open window, she could hear Thomas's laughter as he played in the backyard with his grandmother. The doorbell rang, and Olivia steeled herself before answering. Daniel stood on the porch, looking both familiar and somehow diminished in the year since their divorce. His designer clothes were the same, his hair still perfectly styled, but something in his posture had changed, a slight rounding of the shoulders, perhaps, or a new hesitance in his gaze. You're early, Olivia said, stepping aside to let him in. Traffic was lighter than expected. Daniel entered cautiously, taking in the modestly furnished living room with its comfortable, slightly mismatched furniture. The place looks nice. Thank you. Olivia led him through to the kitchen where she'd prepared coffee. Thomas is excited about the aquarium. He's been talking about it all week. Daniel nodded, accepting the mug she offered. I got the family membership. We can go as often as he wants. An awkward silence settled between them. These monthly handoffs had grown less tense over time, but they were still marked by the echoes of what had been lost. How's the new position? Olivia asked, more to fill the silence than from genuine curiosity. Different. Daniel's lips quirked in what might have been a self-deprecating smile. Smaller company. Lower pressure. Lower salary. Olivia raised an eyebrow. By choice? Not initially, Daniel admitted. The board asked for my resignation after... He trailed off, both of them knowing he referred to the divorce settlement that, while private, had raised questions among Meridian's leadership. I'm sorry to hear that, Olivia said, surprised to find she meant it. Daniel shrugged. Don't be. It's been educational, having to budget more carefully, reassess priorities. He glanced toward the backyard where Thomas's voice carried through the window. Speaking of which, I've been thinking about our custody arrangement, Olivia tensed. The divorce had given her primary custody, with Daniel having Thomas every other weekend and one evening a week for dinner. It was more involvement than Daniel had shown during their marriage, but still limited. What about it? Daniel set his mug down, his expression serious. I'd like more time with him. Olivia studied him carefully. Why now? You barely fought for the current arrangement. Because I was an idiot, Daniel said bluntly. Because I was still thinking about what was convenient for me rather than what Thomas needs. Because... He hesitated, then continued with visible effort. Because you were right. I reduced our family to financial calculations, and I missed what was actually valuable. Olivia was silent, processing this unexpected vulnerability from a man who had always maintained rigid control. I've been seeing someone, Daniel added, a therapist, trying to understand why I approach relationships the way I do. And, Olivia prompted when he paused, and it turns out watching your parents' toxic financial power, struggles doesn't prepare you for healthy relationships. He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Who would have guessed? Despite herself, Olivia felt a softening, Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. I'm glad you're getting help. Daniel nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket and removed an envelope. There's something else. I know the settlement is finalized, but this is separate. Olivia took the envelope cautiously. Inside was a check with a figure that made her breath catch. What is this for? It's what I calculated you would have been able to save if our expenses had been proportional to our incomes during our marriage, Daniel explained. Plus interest. Olivia stared at the check, then at her ex-husband. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. Daniel's voice was firm. It's not about legal obligation. It's about recognizing the real cost of my rigidity. Before Olivia could respond, the back door flew open and Thomas burst in, his face alight with excitement. Daddy! He cried, launching himself at Daniel, who caught him with a genuine smile that transformed his face. Hey, buddy! Ready for our big aquarium adventure? As Daniel knelt to talk with their son, Olivia observed the interaction with new eyes. There was an ease between them that hadn't been there before, a comfort and attention that suggested Daniel had indeed been putting in the effort with Thomas. I made you something, Thomas announced, presenting Daniel with a crayon drawing. This is amazing, Daniel said, examining the colorful scribbles with exaggerated admiration. Is this you and me? And Mommy, Thomas pointed to a third figure. At our house. Daniel's eyes met Olivia's briefly over their son's head, a moment of shared recognition of the complicated reality their choices had created for their child. It's perfect, Daniel told Thomas. I'll put it on my refrigerator right next to the other ones you made me. Later, as Daniel helped Thomas into his jacket and prepared to leave for their outing, he turned to Olivia. About the custody arrangement. We can talk about it, Olivia interrupted. If you're serious about being more involved, we can work something out. Relief washed over Daniel's features. Thank you. I'm not doing it for you, Olivia clarified. I'm doing it for Thomas. He deserves a father who's present. Daniel nodded, accepting the implicit challenge in her words. I know. And I'm trying to be that father now. As they stood in the doorway, Thomas already skipping toward Daniel's car, Olivia was struck by the strange symmetry of their situation. A year ago, she had stood in another doorway, walking away from a marriage that had become a balance sheet. Now they were finding their way toward a different kind of partnership, not the one she had once hoped for, but perhaps one that could still honor the family they had created. Daniel, she called as he turned to leave. That spreadsheet you made analyzing our marriage. He winced. Not my finest hour. No, Olivia agreed. But I'm curious, did you ever calculate the cost of regret? Daniel looked back at her, his expression thoughtful. No, he said finally. That's the one expense I never anticipated. As she watched them drive away, Olivia reflected that some lessons came at a price no spreadsheet could capture, and some gains couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The house she now owned outright, thanks to the divorce settlement. The career that was flourishing since she'd stepped into her new role. The peace of making financial decisions without scrutiny or judgment, and most valuable of all, the knowledge that she had stood up for her worth, not just her financial value, but her worth as a partner, a mother, and a woman who refused to be calculated as a line item in someone else's ledger. She closed the door, turning back to the home she had created on her own terms. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting patterns of light across the floor. A reminder that sometimes, what seems like an ending is merely the ledger being balanced, making room for a new beginning.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.